We're tracking this bombshell story that some members of parliament, MPs, might in fact be so-called double agents working on behalf of other governments, hostile countries, perhaps China, to try and undermine Canadian democracy or at least influence, interfere in our country's elections and the electoral process. We don't know who these MPs are. No names have been released by the government. We don't know how many of them there are, what ridings, what parties, etc. But the Deputy Prime Minister was asked about it. Here's some of what Chrystia Freeland had to say.
We take foreign interference in Canadian democracy very seriously, as I think do all Canadians. I think we all know how precious our democracy is, how lucky we are to live in a democracy, and that this is a time in the world when democracy is under threat. That's why our government has put in place enhanced tools to fight foreign interference in Canada. That's important, and we've done that.
Now, the fact that no names have been released is causing some outrage. Some people say the public has a right to know what's going on here if there are so-called traitors in our midst. Let's bring in Jason Lietaer, Conservative strategist, president of Enterprise Canada. Wow, Jason, your thoughts?
This was a doozy, Todd. After all the year or two about foreign interference, all the deflections, sort of half-truths, reports, failed reports, the special rapporteur, I didn't expect this to drop, right? With parliamentarians essentially calling out some of their colleagues based on intelligence, saying you're working, quote, willingly on behalf of other governments, or I guess unwittingly in some cases. I got to tell you, it was a bombshell report. I'm confused. I'm concerned. This is unprecedented. We don't really know how to investigate this kind of stuff. There's obvious handcuffs on Parliament and on parliamentarians on what they can say and what they can't, but they better get to the bottom of it. Just like, if you remember a couple of years ago, Todd, you and I were talking on this show, and I sort of said, Justin Trudeau's got to get his hands around these foreign interference things, because otherwise people are going to lose confidence in the electoral system. Just like that now, I mean, all of Parliament is under a shroud of, is it you? Is it you? Is it you? We've got to get to a spot where these people are named, adjudicated in some sort of way, and Canadians can decide whether or not their actions are justifiable.
Are you surprised that we're at this point, Jason, where we are now wondering whether certain MPs are suspect?
I think it's an awful situation, and I take no. There's nothing good that comes out of this, right? This is horrible. The fact that, we don't have any idea. We know that China and India and some other sort of state actors are really activists in this. We know that they've got national security priorities that they're trying to get. There's a couple of cases. The Dong case, I think, was relatively well, sort of known out there. And when you think about what's happening here, right? So the Chinese PRC has a preferred candidate. They organize themselves to get out of riding people on buses to go and vote for a particular candidate. Doesn't matter the party, doesn't matter whatever. They prefer a candidate. That should be impossible, or at least if it's done, we should find a way to do it. The Prime Minister in that particular case let him run in 2019 and 2021, despite having, I think, a fair amount of that information. I'm not saying that's the only case, but I'm just saying as a representative sample, it's the kind of thing that just should be verboten, should be impossible, and has to be scrutinized. Sunlight's the best disinfectant here, Todd. We need to know what's going on.
Yeah. What about the way the government has handled this, and whether you think it's fair or unfair? The criticism that the Trudeau government has either been A, asleep at the wheel, or B, has tried to kind of downplay this stuff and say, nah, it's all good. We're handling this. The RCMP is looking into it. CIS is looking into it. Let us deal with this.
Well, I mean, just with regard to that case that I just mentioned, the Dong case. Remember when that was brought up, Todd, they said it was anti-Asian racism, right? Like when somebody raised that, they said you're racist for raising it, and I think that's one of the things that Mr. Trudeau is going to have to reckon with is how he handled this over the last 5 or 10 years. And I'm not saying the Liberals are the only party that's done anything wrong. If there's Conservatives or NDP or Green members or Bloc Québécois, like we should know all of this thing so that we can decide whether or not they have nominations next time. Mr. Trudeau, he was pretty happy to put his sort of, either not get briefed, which means, I mean, he didn't demand answers, let's put it that way, when he was getting, when some of these things were offered to him, or at least should have been offered to him or his staff. And if he didn't demand answers, I think that's, the prime minister has only so many things, and it's not just handing out passports, right? Like, he has so many responsibilities. It's to keep our country together, keep our country safe, make sure that national security and defense are taken care of, make sure that Canadians can afford sort of to live here, and it's a good life. That's what the prime minister is in charge of, and this is a piece of that. It's a small piece, but it's actually quite significant, and I think he's failed miserably.
Tell me how you think this is going to now play out before we go.
Here's the thing. There was some criticism of the CSIS leakers who leaked a bunch of the national security information before. The problem is, some of it was haphazard, some of it maybe wasn't true, some of it was disproven, a lot of it was proven to be true. Here's the thing. If they wouldn't have leaked it, I think most people look back now and realize if that wasn't leaked, we probably wouldn't have got the kind of action out of this Trudeau government that we got. I think we're going to see a similar thing here. I think there's going to be a few weeks where people try and figure out what to do. It's not obvious what to do, by the way. It's not a simple solution. I don't mean to pretend that it is. This is actually very difficult. The party leaders, each of them, have decisions to make on if they knew what was, somebody was in their midst. I'd like to think all of them would do something about it. But the prime minister, he has that information. He's been briefed on it. He's been briefed on it for months, and he's got to find a way to make sure that we can deal with this, so that Canadians can have faith both in the electoral system, but also in the people whose names are on the ballot.
Jason Lietaer, Conservative strategist with Enterprise Canada. Thanks, Jason, for this.